This morning we need to remember that this book is an account of a battle between Satan and God over the heart of Job. Satan wants to gain this victory over God, not by getting Job to love Satan, but by getting Job to deny God and become unfaithful toward him. And that's all Satan has to do, and his tactic is suffering. He accused God of putting a hedge around Job so that, of course, Job is going to be faithful to him. And so God has allowed Satan to take all of Job's possessions. He's been allowed to take his family, his kids, and now his health. And that is the sort of the end of Satan's attack on Job, but now he has some surrogates who come in and are attacking Job. First, his wife telling him to curse God and die, and now his three friends. And we have noticed last week the first discourse by Eliphaz against Job, where his argument was basically that whoever suffered being innocent. If you're going through this tribulation, if you are suffering, it's because you have sinned. And we have to remember that that's what the idea behind Job's friends and all the things that they say is that all suffering is a result of your individual sin. And so if you're suffering, it's because you have sinned against God and He is punishing you. And so Eliphaz went through all of that in chapter 4 and 5. And now we're ready for chapter 6. Where in chapter 6 and 7, Job gets another turn to talk to them and answer his accuser. And that's where we pick up this morning. All right, so he begins by this desire to have his grief weighed. His grief thoroughly weighed, his calamity put in the balances. And what he's talking about here is the unfairness of his suffering and how it's not balanced. He's not suffering because he has sinned. This is an unbalanced amount of suffering for the amount of sin that he has committed. And so in verse 4, it says, "The arrows of the Almighty are within me." Remember that Job doesn't know that Satan is behind this. Job, for all that he knows, is that God is directly torturing him, is directly causing him to suffer, and he doesn't know why. And yet he still retains his faith and trust in God. But he wants to know why. He doesn't understand how unfair this all seems to be. And now his friends are sort of piling on. By the way, there in verse 3, therefore my words are swallowed up. In the American Standard Version, it says, therefore my words have been rash. In fact, the English Standard Version says the same thing. My words have been rash. Job is not afraid here to speak his mind and wonder out loud why these things are happening. But we have to still remember at the end of the book, God says, Job has said about me what is right and the friends haven't. So even though his words have been rash, God is still accepting of what he is saying. All right, so verses 5 through 13 is the next section of this, where he's talking about what he wants from God. This is his desire. And verses 5 through 7, his main point is that he doesn't have what he desires at the moment. All right, so that's why he is complaining about these things. Doth a donkey bray when he has grass? Well, he's not going to be in distress. He's not going to be asking for anything when he has what he needs, the grass, or an ox. He's not going to low and beg for food when he has food. Can that which is unsavory be eaten without salt? Is there any taste in the white of the egg? These aren't the things that we want. All right. And then in verse 7, in the American Standard Version, it says, "My soul refuses to touch them. They are loathsome food to me." All right. So once again, these are not the things that I want. This is not what I desire. And so what's being given to me are things that are undesirable. And so next he's going to transition into what it is that he does desire. Oh, that I might have my request. All right, so what is it that Job is asking God for here? That God would grant me the thing that I long for, the thing that he's waiting for, that he's hoping for from God. That God would be pleased to destroy me. Why won't God, instead of torturing me, just go ahead and kill me? It's a dark thought that Job has, and as we read through this book, Job has a lot of dark thoughts. And within those dark thoughts, there are moments of hope and encouragement, but most of it is very dark. And that's where he is at the moment, that he would loose his hand and cut me off. Once again, as we talked about a few weeks ago, Job is not suicidal. He's not going to take his own life. That's not on the table for Job. But he wishes God would do it. That God would have a mercy killing here. And just go ahead and end things where he doesn't have to suffer anymore. It says, "Then shall I yet have comfort." That's the only way for me right now to have comfort in life, is that if God would just end my life. Now, then I would harden myself in sorrow. In both the American Standard Version and the English Standard Version says, "I would even exult in pain unsparing," or "let me exult in pain that spareth not." Exult means to rejoice greatly. And that's the idea. I could rejoice in the cutting off of this pain that is unrelenting. I would be done with it, and I would be happy. That I have not denied the words of the Holy One. Now in the King James it says, "For I have not concealed the words of the Holy One." The idea is to deny. That I have not denied the words of the Holy One. And so he wants all of this suffering to be over. And he's going to explain a little bit more about that here in the next few verses. All right. "What is my strength that I should wait? What is my end that I should be patient?" Job doesn't see any opportunity in his life for it to get better. All right. All his possessions are gone. His kids are dead, and his health is just, in his point of view, unrecoverable. And so, in his mind, this is the way it's going to be from here on out. This is what I have to live with. So why do I want to live with this anymore? He's going to. He's not going to take matters into his own hands, but he's wanting God to just end this, because what's the point in continuing on? His strength is not the strength of stones or the strength of brass that just continues the same. And so, "Is not my help in me?" In the American Standard, "Is it not that I have no help in me?" Is it not that I have no help in me? English Standard Version, have I any help in me when resource is driven from me? Or when American Standard, wisdom is driven quite from me. And so Job's in an awful situation. It's not going to get any better. Why should he hope and wait for things in this life to continue? Rather, he would just have it end. All right. Verses 14 to the end of this chapter is the next section, where Job speaks out against his friend and defends himself against what has just been said about him. So verse 14, this beginning statement he makes towards Eliphaz. To him that is afflicted, pity should be shown from his friend. Now let's read the two other versions we're comparing today, the American Standard and the English Standard. To him that is ready to faint, kindness should be showed from his friend, even to him that forsaketh the fear of the Almighty. So if we take the American Standard Version's translation of this, it has the idea of, even if it is the case that I have forsaken God, you should show me more kindness than what you have. So even if your accusation is true, you should be better to me than this. English Standard Version says, he who withholds kindness from a friend forsakes the fear of the Almighty. So there's a question over who is forsaking the fear of the Almighty. The one who is being accused or the accuser. Is it Job or Eliphaz? I tend to think that verse 14 is best translated by the English Standard. He who withholds kindness from a friend forsakes the fear of the Almighty. But there's good in both of these ideas that's given to us. Even if it was the case that Job was being punished by God, who was Eliphaz to think that he ought to add to that punishment? Because that's what he's doing. In accusing him and being fairly unkind, we'll just say, and blunt and harsh with his accusation. It's a good reminder to us, even if that is the meaning of this, to be careful how we go about rebuking someone who needs to be rebuked. Even one who has forsaken the fear of the Almighty, there is a kindness that ought to be shown. We can't come at them overly hard or harsh. And then he goes on, my brethren, these friends who are here, have dealt deceitfully as a brook, as the channel of brooks that pass away. In the English Standard Version, my brothers are treacherous as a torrent bed, as torrential streams that pass away. So they're unreliable, that they carry away and they're too fast to get into, and you can't trust to get in them. These aren't pleasant brooks that you would go and take a drink out of. These are harshly flowing brooks, flooding brooks that you can't trust. And he continues with that idea in verses 16 and 17, which are blackish by reason of the ice, and wherein the snow is hid. What time they wax warm, they vanish. So you think about this body of water that has ice in it, but as soon as it heats up, you think you can trust it, but it's gone. Whenever adversity comes, whenever there's difficulty, the ice melts. That's what these friends are. They can't be relied upon in the most difficult of times. And that's what he's accusing his friends of being. Here, this terrible thing has happened to Job, and they're not really there for him. I mean, they're there, but they're making matters worse. So he's compared them to a few different things, to these brooks, to ice, and now to a way that a caravan might go through. In the American Standard Version, the caravans that travel by the way of them turn aside. They go up into the waste and perish. So here are these people traveling from one place to another, and they follow these friends' road signs, and they end up lost out in the middle of nowhere. It's like trying to follow Google Maps sometimes, right? You end up just some weird place. The caravans of Tema looked. The companies of Sheba waited for them. So they're traveling down this road, and they were put to shame because they had hoped. They came thither and were confounded. And so these caravans that would come from these different places, Tema and Sheba, went down these roads, and they ended up nowhere. That's what these friends are like. If you were to listen to them, you're not going to end up in the place that you want to be. So they're untrustworthy. And so now Job gets fairly straightforward with them. All right, so the friends are being this way because of a problem that's within them, because of their own fear. They're not speaking from a place of concern for Job. They are speaking from a place of, well, what if this were to happen to me? The only way to keep this type of suffering from coming on me is to live a certain way. And so here Job, being innocent, is suffering, and that has caused fear to come upon his friends. And it's from trying to deny that fear that they are speaking. And so he says, you're nothing. You see my casting down or my terror, my calamity, and it's caused you to be afraid. I didn't ask for you to come and bring me anything. I didn't ask for a reward or a bribe from you. I didn't ask you to deliver me or to save me or to even help me. They've come as friends to be with Job, but Job is saying, I didn't ask for any of this. So he says, teach me. If I've done wrong, show me where I've done wrong. Teach me and I will hold my tongue. I'll stop talking. I'll listen. I won't defend myself. If you'll show me where it is that I'm wrong. What have I done to bring this suffering on me? And they can't do that. Later on, they're going to give a list of hypothetical things that most likely he's done to bring this upon them, but they don't know that he's done those things. They have zero evidence that Job is suffering because of his sin. But they are trying to fit it to the narrative that they believe, that all suffering is a result of sin. So Job tells them here, show me my sin. If you're going to accuse me of sin, show it to me. Of course, they don't have the ability to do that. And so how forcible are right words? But what doth your arguing reprove? In the American Standard, but your reproof, what does it reprove? You're trying to rebuke me of sin, but you can't name the sin. If you were speaking uprightly, your words would have force behind them, and I would have no choice but to repent of my sin. But you're not speaking what's right. Instead, he says, do you imagine to reprove words? Or do you think to reprove words, seeing that the speeches of one that is desperate are as wind? Job is in a state of desperation, and they're trying to parse his words and try to find technical things wrong with it, which is a terrible thing to do for someone who's in grief. Those who are grieving ought to be allowed to express their grief and be reasoned with and come to a better knowledge of things. But to sit there and try to correct everything that a grieving person is saying is an unfruitful endeavor. And that's why he's saying here, why are you trying to reprove the words of someone who's desperate, knowing that their words are as wind? Ye overwhelm the fatherless, and ye dig a pit for your friend. The American Standard says ye would cast lots upon the fatherless and make merchandise of your friend. English Standard Version, you would bargain over your friend. Speaking to their general lack of concern for Job and what they're saying. Now therefore be pleased to look upon me, for surely I will not lie to your face. I'm not going to lie to your face. You can tell whether or not I'm lying. You know that I'm not going to sit here, look you in the eye, and say something I know to be false. And these men knew Job, knew what kind of character he had. They could believe that. And so he says, please turn, let no injustice be done. Turn now. My vindication is at stake. That's the English Standard Version of verse 29. My vindication is at stake. You're trying to tear down my character, my reputation. But I am innocent. And so don't be unjust toward me. Is there any injustice on my tongue? Cannot my palate discern the cause of calamity? In the King James Version there in verse 30. Cannot my taste discern perverse things? I know when things don't taste right. Morally, is what Job is saying. I know when things are not right, when things are wrong. And I know that I haven't done any of these things to bring this type of suffering upon myself. Now he's going to continue in the next chapter to rebuke his friends for their approach toward him. But Job is making a very good argument here for his innocence, and that this suffering is not the result of his personal sin. And he's expecting more from his friends to be more understanding of him and to speak more of what was right than just making stuff up about it.